So my name is Shawik Kasmi. I am Chief Innovation Officer at TII and co-founder of few startups recently launched with Dr. Najwa.
Thank you so much. And you've joined us from?
We come from Abu Dhabi.
From Abu Dhabi, that's right. Nelly?
Hello, my name is Nelly Porter, and I'm still from Google.
Hi, I'm Antoine Deligny-Lavaux, so I'm a researcher in the security group that is under Mark Hutchinovich, so I think I represent Mark for this panel.
Great. Jonathan Doden, founder of Equity Lab, and I'm here wearing two hats, both with Equity and also with the Confidential Computing Consortium, and excited to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Harold Gilkey, work at AMD in our product security office, working on architecture supporting our confidential computing technologies.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us. I'll start off with a really simple question. What does confidential AI mean? Is it your experience that it just means that it's running in an encrypted runtime? Is that what you guys think of as confidential AI, or is it something more than that? And I'll let anybody raise their hand and take the question. I don't know if we need all four people to answer that one, but anybody have a hot take on that?
If you don't mind, I will take our client's perspective to it. I think that they don't really understand the requirement of confidential computing. They still believe that securing their data and the access to their data is enough to claim having reached a mature level of security. And I was really impressed by the discussion this morning because it brings a completely different perspective, even for myself, on what true confidential computing is. We have a massive transformation happening in UA, which is the transformation of 50% of the workflows that should be fully agentic. And when we look at most of the pitch deck of many companies here, we are pretty much advanced compared to the reality on the field. Data is still siloed. Accessing the data is complicated. There is a very large diversity of versioning of in the technology stack. Giving a definition today of what our clients define as confidential computing and confidential AI, really far away from what I have heard this morning.
So that's a really powerful point you made, Shawky, which just want to make sure everybody heard this, which is in the United Arab Emirates, there's a mandate that within 2 years, 50% of the processes, the human processes, must be converted to autonomous AI agents. So this idea of verifiable or proof related to what these systems are doing, what they're accessing, what rules are being enforced, is profoundly important at a nation state scale for that ambitious of an endeavor. So it's a great call out. And so does somebody else have a thought around, is confidential AI just confidential computing, or is it something more than that?
So I think I have a few comments on that. So I think confidential AI means different things for different people and different customers. So what we very commonly see, of course, is the big AI labs. What they care about is their models staying secret. These are extremely valuable models. Some of them, like the Mythos class from Opaque, potentially extremely dangerous if they leak. And for these people, I think they see confidential AI as mostly protecting models, right? And making sure they cannot ever leak. I think there are also many people that interpret confidential AI as making sure their data remains private, right? I use ChatGPT, I use Anthropic with my company's data. I want to make sure that no one but myself can actually access the data that I use or see the response that I get. And I think you have this new class of users, which are the agentic systems. And then confidential AI becomes something actually even more complex, right? So it becomes this idea that we can give identities to agents, that we can have interaction between autonomous, mutually distrusting parties. And I think that it's kind of also built on the two previous one, but it becomes a lot more.
That's a great call out, that the frontier labs predominantly think about confidential AI in terms of model weight protection, and then it varies from there. I think that Nelly's team at Google has established a new standard with Apple Private Cloud Compute that consumers' data is kept provably private during inference time. So Nelly, you probably have an opinion on this.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And again, to step back before we will talk about private cloud computing, I think in our definition and some things that we educated our customers and customers of our customers, is that when we're talking about confidential AI, it's not about TEs. It's about the whole entire confidential system, as I was talking about. From the moment users are interacting with the system, how to ensure that all of their data and all of their intelligence is coming without anybody being able to pick into that or take advantage of this, how those systems, irrespective of where they are, would be able to interact with this data, with this intelligence without leaking anything outside, and also the results, how it will be delivered. And to add to that, again, to add complexity to this world, we've seen multiple use cases when agentic, sorry, I bring in agentic to this conversation again, multiple agents trying to process the same data with guarantees that none of them will see this data. Because the problem with agentic, when they see or have even read access to this data, they cannot forget. So how to ensure that we will provide this MPC environment, multi-party computational environment, but now when the actors is actually agents and not humans, or combination of both, and how to ensure that this all confidential AI system is actually functioning and producing the results we're looking for. So it's multiple ways to slice these wonderful things, but it's never a single one, because otherwise we would already check box and move on to something different.
Thanks, Nelly. Jonathan.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting when you speak to the average consumer and you ask them about privacy, they're not going to stick their hands up and say, this is something that's important to me. And that's because there's a generational change about how we think about how we interact with the systems. We trade, as I think, Aaron, you put it really nicely this morning, that there's this kind of barter that we have today with the systems. And I think that now AI represents a frontier where we're saying, not this time. We're not willing to do that barter. And here's the reason why. What's really critical is that we keep not only the information confidential, but that we allow for a zone in which you have different types of intelligence that can interact with each other. What's the benefit of confidentiality? It's that I have more authentic and more intelligent forms of conversations. For instance, like if I talk to my lawyer and it's not a private conversation, that's a worse conversation, right? Or if I'm speaking to maybe a potential employer and that's not a private conversation, that means I can't actually present my very best self because I'm worried about that being leaked. Think about what that means. It means we've degraded the experience and the chance for these agents or other types of actors to actually come together and to have the most intelligent, the most effective, and the most trustworthy conversations. That's the ultimate outcome of these types of solutions, and that's why this primitive is in fact so powerful, is that it helps us establish this the highest degree of intelligence, and it for the first time, gives us a chance to not make that type of barter that we previously have had, or we've had to give everything away. And I think AI is so powerful that this is the baseline.
That's a really good framing about the quality of conversation is largely dependent upon your ability to be open and honest with the system. So let's hear from the silicon vendor who's going to tell us it's just about the DEE. Just joking. Please go ahead.
No, I mean, and that's one of the challenges or the oversimplifications is, hey, just put it in a TEE and you're done.
TEE,
right? But it's much more complex than that, right? It's not just, yes, that's a fundamental, necessary and sufficient condition, but on top of it, right, there's the whole how are you verifying that is what, your protections on isolation, your protections on rooted in that hardware root of trust, And then also as you're bringing this out now, so as we get to agentic AI, we get these systems with multiple different devices in them. CPUs are now controlling fleets of GPUs or accelerator devices, connecting to NICs, doing scale up, scale out. How do you keep those claims or those promises that you made about keeping your data private when so much of your data and your model is moving through the system? And so that's one of the challenges that we see as a Silicon vendor, is bringing that out to the community. There's obviously security protocols around that are being developed by this whole community. But as we interconnect these things across multiple configurations, the complexity goes exponential in terms of permutations of what you could have. And so, again, bringing it back to the fundamental rooted in hardware roots of trust, having some security primitives around those, and then therefore providing those protections.
So you bring up a really interesting point, which is something I've seen in the field with our customers. Is I don't know if we have a customer who runs an entire workflow end-to-end exclusively inside of a TEE. What we most commonly see, is there's the agent control layer running inside of a TEE with verifiability, but then the communication channels to external tools or resources are attested, but not mutually, and they can get some guarantees around that as part of their workload that's sufficient for where they are today. So it's an interesting point you're talking about, where you have the CPU calling fleets of GPUs. We have customers that are doing self-hosted LLMs inside of a confidential GPU, but most of them are running what we would call our agent control layer inside of a TEE and putting enforcement and building an attestation record that's verifiable from that. So speaking of that, we've seen now confidential AI in production across sovereign and a variety of regulated industries. I'd love to hear from anybody who'd like to share on the panel an interesting workload that was unlocked from your experience because you could provide this verifiable layer. Does anybody have one that they'd like to share that's interesting?
I have one.
Great.
Not talking about PCC.
Does it involve billions of iPhones? Because that's a good one.
This is the billions of iPhones, but you will hear about that tomorrow, so I won't kind of leave the chance for you to hear from the horse mouth. Another interesting use case, you probably know Swift. Swift is financial organizations that combine and actually working with 450 plus financial organizations worldwide. They validate and transact trillions of transactions per minute, something incredible. And the whole GDP, I think, of US is like 2 minutes for them. So it's kind of Swift. So for Swift, what they figured out that, again, fraud, financial fraud, is incredibly, again, problematic issue. And they have developed a model to, again, understand the insides of fraudulent transaction. However, to validate this model, no surprise, they need real data, not synthetic data, coming from different vendors of their Swift community. So what they've done, they put it in confidential environment and were able actually to run verification of this model to understand efficacy of it. So there is wonderful, again, things that we forgot. It's not about, again, training and inference, but also verification or performance validation sometimes. So those very sensitive data and sensitive models that happening all in the entrusted environment.
Thank you, Nelly. Somebody else want to add an interesting workload? Come on, Jonathan.
Yeah,
I know you've got
to jump in. I think that out of the many inspirational uses of AI, the one that gets me up in the morning is thinking about personalized medicine, because what we're on right now is the precipice of this enormous change in healthcare, in which now AI is going to not only be able to help create various forms of accelerated drug discovery, but potentially even personalized treatment plans and even medicine on the fly. And this sounds insane and fantastical, but actually we're actually putting down the tracks for this. But here's the critical thing, is that for personalized medicine to work, I not only need to have a digital twin of myself with my own data, but I also need to look at population data. That's the only way to start doing, you can imagine, these kind of automated clinical trials. So we've been really inspired by the possibilities of being able to take very sensitive patient records that are not only personal, but also at a population level, and use that to accelerate the ability to really zero in on what a personalized solution might look like. This is, it's truly a change. And you asked, like, what is something that can only be done with confidentiality? This is, in fact, it. And the ability for CC to provide the layer of confidentiality to do the work, great. The ability to verify that it has been done to the compliance, the next level, and then to portably be able to take those proofs into different environments so that you can get the maximum amount of data. That's really that horizon that we see. And again, there is simply no other way to do this, to be compliant and to arrive at that type of solution rapidly.
So Dr. Shawky, the UAE, once again, leading in this category, has taken the Falcon model family and fine-tuned it with the national healthcare records. So that I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that or a different story, but
No,
I
mean,
continue to be impressed with how forward and advanced you are.
So I think it's not a secret that we went through an interesting conflict, and during that period we have launched a startup called Tactica AI, which is an intelligence platform looking at providing the best insights on the localization of enemy assets, and you can imagine that in the moment, in this period, you have a very large number of partners, countries, and organizations supplying intelligence that you need to ingest and fuse very fast. And because the technology is becoming mature when it comes to confidential AI, we were able to bring in models to detect specific type of assets, without breaching the level of security and confidentiality that are imposed to our clients. So it is a strong enablement for on-demand partnership, data transfer, intelligence sharing between partners, and we have been able, which is interesting, we have been able to connect intelligence services to communicate and exchange data very fast, while the standards and the security requirements are yet to be drafted. So it's we have a shout out to the hardware people. I think they are leading the innovation in confidential computing, because we can see that it's not a hardware problem. We know how to secure computation. What we don't know today is how can we guarantee to assess and audit behaviors. So technically speaking, where our focus is today is more on what an agent is doing and how it is doing it, and why it is doing it at that particular moment, while the computation is already a problem that those guys have solved. And this is interesting, because it shifts completely now our focus. And for the platform we have developed, specifically for intelligence application, it is a true enablement to be able to rely on TEE and confidential computing.
Thank you. I can ask another question, but if somebody has another interesting workload, or I don't want to cut you off.
I think I would have also chosen the healthcare, because the applications that we are saying here are quite amazing. And I think it's one of these fields where a lot of potential has been unlocked by confidential AI. So for instance, the ability to do clinical trial between companies on medications, this is something that before was almost impossible, or you have to create very complicated legal structure and enroll on hospitals, third parties, get patient consents. So all of these extremely complicated processes can be really simplified, and that's I think will deliver some amazing progress in the healthcare industry. So I'm very much looking forward to more of that.
Great.
Yeah, I think to both of your points, I think it also helps enable access to some of the more forward-leaning frontier models of some of these things, being able to do, doing healthcare things inside a confidential compute with more forward-leaning models that they can take advantage of the scale of the cloud that they previously couldn't. And so not only are you enabling it, but you're enabling it, I guess, better or stronger, more capable models.
Great. The next question, which I'm really excited to hear from everybody, their answer is, what's a technical assumption that was disproven about confidential in the last 12 months? So since our last summit last year, we've seen a tremendous amount of adoption and incredible value unlocked through the use of confidential. I'd love to hear from any or all of you. What is a technical assumption that people had that we've just disproven in the last 12 months?
I think performance. One of the initial, bringing in confidential computing and the access controls or encryptions and things like that were, that was a barrier to entry. What's the performance impact of this? And I believe over, not just in the last 12 months, but over, generations of developing these products and working with our partners in optimizations and learning from those, constantly improving, such that the performance delta is not as high or it's not as negligible to the point where we really are going to get to a ubiquitous confidential computing.
So it's a positive thing. I can bring the negative things.
Oh yeah.
So, for long time, confidential compute was building their attestation and other capability based on predetermined integrity story. We were expecting to build those extended hashes, started from whatever, and building our claims and capability is very deterministic. When agentic AI become reality, and the decisions are made not only about these 4 lines of Python code that are running in your TE, but also why is they trying to do it? And definitely sometimes those agents becoming confusing and confused deputy. So with all of those situations, the integrity that we so used to is not working anymore. Because the ability to prove that it's the same 4 lines of Python code doesn't help to ensure that this particular thing is actually making decision based on piece of data that was tampered with, that you have no idea. I'm talking about indirect, again, prompt injection, for example. So I think these simplifications that we made when we started all of this movement, working on confidentiality and integrity of the systems, needs to be rethought, rethink, redesign, again, adapting to this much less deterministic world.
Just want to plus one to that, and in putting on my hat here to speak on the behalf of the consortium, this is why the consortium is so important, is that this isn't static technology. This is evolving, and it's responding to dynamic threats. Something that I'll add as a part of that conversation is that the reality is now that this, if you think about actually the standard of what we want, what do we mean by verifiability by a third party? What we mean is independent verifiability. And one of the challenges that we've had is that as we've thought about how to take integrity, let's say that's on-prem and go to the cloud, Nelly won't be completely happy with me on this, is that I have a challenge because on-prem I can actually establish full integrity because I know exactly what I've built. In the cloud, there are abstractions, and the firmware is attested to some extent. However, there's a lot more to the operating system than just simply the firmware. We have things like, the RAM disk, we've got the file system, we have like all sorts of different things. This is the system that you're talking about. Exactly. So what you have here is a moment, I know this sounds very wonky, it's maybe for more of the room than projecting out like the company line or the industry line for the cameras, as it were. This is the most important part in which confidential computing can become ubiquitous because we can create these integrity guarantees up and down the stack and across different types of topologies. This is what's critical. I need to know what ran on Google, also ran on Microsoft, and then what ran on-prem, and we need to have an attestation layer that is unified. That's exactly why a consortium is so powerful, because we can come together and make those types of claims independently verifiable. And a shout out to Apple. you guys did this originally when you had confidential computing on your own silicon. It was awesome. It
now
set
is
the
the
standard, and now's the time when Nellie's going to announce soon that she can give me an independent attestation of much more than just the firmware. Then, we will kind of return to that gold standard. We can do it. I'm saying this because I know we can do it, not because I think it's impossible. So that hopefully gives you a sense of like where, as an industry, I think we can come together, and that's going to be like a rocket ship if we can get that.
Nailed it. Now it's time for the deep cuts, which Claude helped me with. So Harold, AMD's December 2025 blog framed the trust mechanism for confidential AI as something provable. Privacy is verified by remote attestation, speaking of the topic. Now, you lead the work at AMD's product security office at the silicon level. What's the hardest open problem in extending the attestation across the full AI pipeline?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I think, kind of going back to my earlier comment, as we bring in more devices, accelerator devices, switches, network, interface cards, things like that, right? Each one of these is a device with its own root of trust, its own firmware, can do its own independent attestation. The challenge I see is really the composition of all those. How do you take all of those independent attestation evidences and chain those together into some simplified meeting thing that you can hand to a verifier, right? And so I think that's one challenge is how do we get there with that? The other thing is, once you've done that, right, that was sort of a, snapshot of how the system came up or how you've configured things. What is the life cycle or the lifetime of this confidential, TCB or whatever? How long is it up? How are you doing maintenance on it? Bringing up GPUs, taking down GPUs? What does that mean to your attestation story that you made a promise to, right? So working through all those. And then kind of echoing some of the comments up here too, in terms of the attestation, right? Now you've got multiple devices, potentially multiple vendors. Suddenly you could potentially have, different evidence formats, different reference value formats. We really need to move more towards open standards around those and getting attestation reports that are much simpler to consume by other tools and independent verifiers. Not that every new device that comes out breaks their tools and they have to rebuild them and things like that. So.
Great call out. And of course, we were talking about that during the keynotes from the top of the stack down around that concept of a portable governance record that we should all coalesce around. Deep cut, Antoine. In ACMQ, you frame the core problem this way. Confidential computing lets a user authenticate code running in a TE, but users also need evidence this code is trustworthy. So attacking the same gap here between attesting what's running and trusting what it does is the whole game for confidential AI. What's the hardest unsolved technical problem in closing it for production AI systems?
Wow, I think I could give you.
You've got a minute and 43 seconds.
I probably need a full hour to answer that question, but I will only pick one aspect. I have probably 20, but I'll pick one, which is a very interesting question, right? So this is the issue of multi-tenancy and states in the inference systems. I'm not even talking about agents yet, right? Because we talk about agent memory, which is its
even
own,
more complicated. Yep.
It's quite complicated, but even just simple inference system, right? The problem is that you actually have a lot of shared states there, and the critical one is the KV cache, right? And if you look at a Copilot session, you will probably see something like 95% token cache, right? So
that's a lot of private information.
Exactly. So that's a lot of private information. And some of this is actually observable between requests by different users, right? And that's a very tricky problem. So if you look at Apple PCC, what they say is that they make every inference request stateless, right? So they basically clean up everything between requests. If you do that, you get great protection in that case. But then if it would multiply the cost of using Copilot, GitHub Copilot by 20. So that's something that I'm very interested in, and that actually requires, if you want to fully solve that problem, you may actually need to go very deep with the accelerator manufacturers to introduce like hardware cache partitioning notions or something like scalable AOV to split contexts while sharing the model weight. So you really need very complex, interesting technical solution if you want to solve that gap. But I expect we will see some real attacks that use the KV cache.
To
did
add
it.
to
You did it in
complexity that you said, now a new type of accelerators available on the market, it's called LPU, and those caching, again, those specifically accelerators are doing and storing KV caches. So again, combination of GPU, CPU, TPU, LPU, we're all in the fun.
And DPUs
fun.
on the network wire.
Absolutely. Not talking about GPUs.
Yeah.
So we will have plenty of PUs to deal with and making them confidential.
I should have gotten through all the deep cuts because I have one for Shauki and Jonathan that recalls.
It's better to pass.
I think we got to go. They're gonna pull us off the stage with a hook. But this was so much fun talking to all of you. Thank you so much for all of your time and joining us on the panel.